If you win this case, her colleague said, sliding the file across the desk, Ethan Cole loses everything. His company, his reputation, his freedom. Amara nodded slowly. She knew. What her colleague didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Ethan Cole had already given her everything once. When her mother was sick, when the university was threatening to revoke her scholarship, when she had one foot out the door and nowhere to turn, an anonymous donor had appeared like a miracle and paid it all. Every last cent. She had never found out who, until now. She stared at the name on the file, Ethan Cole, and she asked herself the question that would keep her awake for the next 7 nights. Do you betray the man who made you, or do you betray everything he made you for? The file sat on Amara's kitchen table at 2 a.m., untouched, like a bomb she was afraid to detonate. Around it were empty coffee cups, 3 crumpled sticky notes, and a photograph she hadn't meant to pull out but couldn't put back. In the photograph, she was 19, thin, hollow-eyed, standing outside the university financial office in a coat 2 sizes too big, holding a letter that said her enrollment was suspended pending payment of outstanding fees. He remembered that day like a scar remembers the knife. She had called her mother and said nothing, just listened to her breathe on the other end of the line, her mother who was lying in a hospital bed with tubes in her arms and no idea her daughter's world was collapsing. Amara. Her mother's voice had been thin as paper. Are you eating? Yes, Mama, you're lying. I'm fine, Mama. She hadn't been fine. She had been 24 hours away from packing her bags and going home to a village that had no future for her, abandoning the law degree she had clawed her way into, the dream she had carried since she was 8 years old, watching her father lose a land dispute because he couldn't afford a lawyer and didn't know his rights. She had been 24 hours away from becoming another girl the world swallowed whole, and then the email came. It was from the university bursar's office, short, clinical. Dear Miss Amara Ose, please be advised that your outstanding balance has been settled in full by an anonymous donor. Your enrollment is hereby reinstated. Kindly report to the financial office to sign the confirmation forms. She had read it 4 times. 5 times. She had gone to the financial office shaking and asked who paid, and the woman behind the desk had looked at her with tired eyes and said, Anonymous means anonymous, dear. For 12 years, Amara had carried that donor like a secret saint. She had graduated top of her class. She had passed the bar on her first attempt. She had built a reputation as one of the sharpest young litigators in the city, the kind of lawyer who didn't just win cases but dismantled systems, who took on corporations and made them sweat. Every achievement she laid at the feet of the ghost who had saved her. Every time she stood before a judge, she thought, I am here because someone believed I was worth saving. She had never found out who. Until 3 days ago, when her supervising partner Marcus had dropped the Coal Industries file on her desk and said, This one's yours. We need our best on it. Coal Industries. Ethan Cole, a billionaire whose construction empire had allegedly been defrauding government housing contracts for years, siphoning money meant for low-income families into offshore accounts while building substandard homes that were literally crumbling. The case had been building for 2 years. The evidence was solid. The victims were real. Hundreds of families, poor families, the exact kind of people Amara had spent her career fighting for. It was the biggest case of her life, the kind that made careers permanent. And on the second page of the donor disclosure documents her paralegal had compiled, buried in a list of Ethan Cole's corporate social responsibility expenditures, she had seen it. A line item, 12 years old, anonymous educational grant, University of Ghana School of Law, recipient, Ose, her own name. Looking back at her, she had sat very still for a very long time. Now it was 2 a.m. and she still hadn't moved. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, early morning call with the AG's office tomorrow at 7. You're leading. Be ready. She put the phone face down. She picked up the file. She opened it. Ethan Cole's office was on the 32nd floor of a building made almost entirely of glass, which Amara thought was either a statement of confidence or a profound lack of self-awareness for a man currently under investigation. His assistant had offered her water 3 times. She had declined 3 times. She sat with her back straight and her face composed in the careful blankness she had trained herself into over years of sitting across from people who expected her to flinch. She was not here officially. She had told no one she was coming. She didn't fully know why she had come except that she couldn't walk into that courtroom without looking him in the eye first, without giving him the chance to be something other than the monster the file made him. Ethan Cole walked in and she understood immediately why people trusted him. He was in his mid-50s, silver at the temples, with the kind of calm that didn't come from arrogance, but from a man who had been tested and had not broken. He looked at her across the room and something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or the practiced alertness of a man who knew when trouble had walked into his house. "Miss Osei," he said, "I was wondering when you'd come." She hadn't expected that. "You know who I am. I know exactly who you are." He sat down across from her, no desk between them, two chairs facing each other like a conversation and not an interrogation. "I followed your career, every case, every ruling." He paused. "I was proud of you. I know I don't have the right to say that." Amara's composure cracked just slightly at the edges. She had prepared for denial. She had prepared for lawyers and deflection, and the performance of innocence she had seen 100 times. She had not prepared for this. "Why?" she said. One word. Everything she had been carrying for 12 years compressed into 3 letters. Ethan looked at his hands. "I was at the university that day. I had a meeting with the dean. I was funding a new library wing. I saw you coming out of the financial office." He stopped. "I had a daughter once. Her name was Nana. She died when she was 17. Meningitis. She wanted to be a doctor." His voice was even, but his jaw tightened. "You reminded me of her. The way you were holding that letter, like you were trying not to let it beat you." He looked up. "I didn't want to see you lose." The room was very quiet. "Mr. Cole," Amara said carefully, "what you did for me changed my life. I need you to understand that I know that. I need you to understand that I am not here as someone who forgot." She leaned forward. "But I've read your file. I've seen the contracts. I've spoken to families who are living in homes with cracking foundations and leaking roofs, homes that were supposed to be safe, homes that were paid for with government money that was meant to protect them. I need to know if it's true." He didn't look away. "It's more complicated than the file makes it look. It always is. Is it true?" A long silence. "Some of it," he said quietly. "Not all of it. Not the way they're framing it." Amara felt something shift. "Tell me." What followed was 2 hours that rewrote everything she thought she knew about the case. Ethan spoke slowly and carefully, like a man who had been waiting for someone to actually ask. The fraud, he explained, had not been his initiative. 3 years ago, his company had been taken over by a board of investors, men he had trusted, men who had restructured the procurement division and introduced a parallel accounting system he had not understood the implications of until 14 months ago, when a whistleblower inside his own company had come to him privately. "I tried to fix it internally," he said. "I started reversing contracts. I fired 4 senior managers. I commissioned an independent audit." He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a document, turning it to face her. "This is dated 8 months before your office filed charges. I reported it myself. I sent this to the regulatory authority." Amara stared at the document. It was real. She could see the timestamp, the registration number, the regulatory seal. Her mind was moving fast now, lawyer fast, pulling threads. "This was never disclosed to us," she said. "I know. It was buried. I don't know by whom. I have suspicions." His eyes were steady. "Miss Osei, I am not a perfect man. I have made decisions in my career I am not proud of, but I did not steal from poor families. When I found out my company was being used to do that, I tried to stop it." He paused. "I need someone who is actually good at this to find the truth." She looked at him for a long time. "You're not asking me to drop the case," she said slowly. "No," he said. "I'm asking you to do your job properly. I'm asking you to find who actually did this and make them answer for it." A pause. "I'm asking you to be the lawyer I watched you become." What happened next nearly ended Amara's career before it saved it. She went back to her office and did not drop the case. She did the opposite. She tore it apart and rebuilt it from the ground up. She filed a motion to compel full disclosure of all regulatory communications. She brought in a forensic accountant. She worked 18-hour days for 3 weeks straight, surviving on coffee and the particular rage of someone who hates being manipulated. Because that was what this was. She had been handed a case that had been deliberately shaped, evidence that had been curated, a billionaire gift wrapped as a villain to hide the men who had actually built the machine. Marcus called her into his office on a Wednesday morning with a look on his face she had never seen before. "Amara, what are you doing? The AG's office is asking questions. They say you're pulling threads that aren't part of the brief." "The brief is wrong," she said flatly. "The brief is what we were hired to prosecute." "Marcus." She set a folder on his desk. 3 members of the board of coal industries have been making payments to a senior official in the regulatory authority for the past 4 years. That official is the same person who buried Ethan Cole's self-report. The fraud happened inside coal industries, yes, but Ethan Cole reported it. Someone made sure that report disappeared. Someone wanted him to take the fall so the real architects could walk. She tapped the folder. I have the wire transfers. I have the emails. I have a former compliance officer willing to testify. Marcus opened the folder. He was quiet for a long time. This is going to create enemies, he said. I know. Big ones, I know. He looked up at her. Are you sure, Marcus? There are families living in dangerous houses. The people responsible for that are about to watch an innocent man go to prison for it. No. She held his gaze. I am not sure about anything except that I cannot walk away from this. He closed the folder. Then let's go to war. The trial lasted 11 days. Amara stood before the court, and she did not just present a case. She unraveled a conspiracy. She called witnesses who had been told they had no voice and gave them one. She presented the buried self-report with the quiet devastation of someone who had done the work and knew it. She named the 3 board members. She named the regulatory official. She traced every diverted contract, every crumbling wall, every family that had been cheated back to the man who had engineered it. On the 9th day, the first board member accepted a plea deal. On the 10th, regulatory official resigned. On the 11th day, the judge looked out over the courtroom and said words that Amara would hear in her dreams for years afterward. The charges against Ethan Cole are hereby dismissed. The court finds that the evidence not only fails to support the prosecution's original theory but actively contradicts it. What this court has witnessed over these 11 days is the meticulous reconstruction of truth by counsel who refused to prosecute a convenient lie. The courtroom erupted. Amara stood very still in the middle of it. She found him outside on the courthouse steps in the thin afternoon light, the city moving around them. Indifferent and loud. He looked like a man who had just put down something very heavy and wasn't sure yet how to walk without it. Miss Osei, he said. Amara, she said. I think you've earned that. Something moved across his face. Amara, he extended his hand. Thank you. She shook it. Don't thank me. I wasn't doing it for you. I know, he said. That's why it means something. She looked at him. This man who had slipped an anonymous kindness in the worst day of her life and disappeared. Who had watched her from a careful distance for 12 years. Who had trusted her with his wealth. She had every reason to bury him. Why didn't you ever tell me? She asked. All these years, you followed my career. You could have reached out. He was quiet for a moment. Because it wasn't alone. I didn't want anything back. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me. He looked out at the street. Nana would have been 31 this year. I like to think she would have been something like you. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. Knowing you were out there doing this work. That was enough. That was more than enough. Amara felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't known was tight. 12 years of gratitude with nowhere to go. Finally finding its destination. She would have been proud of you too, she said quietly. For what you tried to do when you found out. For not running. He nodded once, pressed his lips together, collected himself the way men of his generation collected themselves, quietly and with great effort. What happens to you now? He asked. After this. You made enemies today. I know, she picked up her briefcase. I made them for the right reasons. I'll figure out the rest.